Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. The words being used at the negotiations between the European finance ministers and leaders of Europe's countries involved in the Eurozone and the Greek government are words that are usually used around times of war. Humiliation, dignity. Well, what will Greece emerge with? It wasn't very long ago, just a few days ago, there was a referendum, and the referendum was about the dignity of Greece. Would people vote no to an agreement they thought was humiliating? Well, they did vote no, and now the negotiations that are taking place, in spite of that referendum, the Greek government offered up a set of proposals that wasn't very far from those that were rejected. But Germany, it seems, is driving through a proposal that even goes further than anything presented before. So now joining us to talk about all of this is, first of all, from London, Ontario, Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri is a partner with the Canadian law firm of Siskins, where he heads the firm's securities class actions practice. He's also a board member of the Real News. And joining us from Athens is Michalis Spourdalakis. He's the Dean of the School of Economics and Politics at the University of Athens. Dimitri, could you just first of all give us a quick summation of where things are at? Now, apparently meetings are even still going on. We're recording this after midnight in Europe, but apparently the negotiations are still going on. And so as best as we know, where are things at?
My understanding is that Greece has been given, the Greek government has been given an option of a temporary exit from the Eurozone, which I understand would be envisioned to last for approximately 5 years. I understand that that would be coupled with some amount of humanitarian assistance, and that Greece would have the opportunity to return to the Eurozone potentially in 5 years' time. They would have to reapply and undoubtedly go through some sort of rigorous screening mechanism. The other option for it remaining in is that it adopted a number of measures and pretty much immediately. 7 would have to be implemented, 7 straight away. One is the streamlining of VAT, the broadening of the tax base, the sustainability of the pension system, the adoption of a code of civil procedure, the safeguarding of the legal independence for the statistics office in Greece, the full implementation of automatic spending cuts, and satisfaction of bank recovery and resolution directives. All of this is obviously quite technical, but that is I can tell you that as a lawyer who's fairly familiar with the legislative process, to have to address those subjects within the space of 3 days is an impossible task in my view. I mean, it cannot be done in a thorough, intelligent, and responsible manner in so short a period of time. In addition to that, I understand that there would have to be some initiation of a legislative process towards another 5 points. One is the privatization of the electricity transmission grid, decisive action on non-performing loans of banks, ensuring the independence of the privatization body, the depoliticization of the Greek administration. That in and of itself strikes me as a Herculean, time-consuming task. And the return of officials from the Troika to Athens, something that has been politically toxic to this government, and with good reason. When I look at and there's been discussion also about Greece placing $50 billion of assets in a trust, which it has emerged under the German proposal would be controlled by a corporation that has links to Wolfgang Schäuble.
Well, he's the actual chair of the board, if I understand it correctly, of the company that's the holding company of the institution.
Right. That's my understanding as well.
Michalis, this $50 billion of Greek viable or valuable assets that are supposed to be put into this trust. I mean, this is what everybody is calling humiliating. Every journalist reporting on this is using this word humiliating. The $50 billion fund seems to be designed so that these talks have to fail. What do you make of this, Michalis?
Well, I remember having or giving a public talk about almost 3 years ago with one of today's cabinet minister, and he, George Stathakis, and he was telling back then that if we were to privatize public property, this wouldn't exceed the 8 or probably 10 billion euros. Now, the task of raising 50 billion euros by selling public property, it's a task that cannot be achieved, and it's part of the humiliation. But part of the humiliation is the legal processes that they are proposing. And they are proposing to Syriza to follow the path of the previous governments, where the habit of the previous governments is to violate or come near to violation of our constitutional regulations. I mean, how on earth you can pass in a week 6 major legislations? It's impossible. You can do it only if you actually bypass any parliamentary procedure and any kind of parliamentary dialogue and exchange. It's part of the plan to humiliate the Greek government.
And I just want to, Michael's talking about the constitutional aspects, obviously extremely important in any sovereign nation. I'm talking about the practical aspects. It's a two-edged sword here. I mean, merely the practical implications of trying to pass this vast body of legislation within the space of several days is, to me, in and of itself, a clear message that the creditors do not want a deal with Greece. They cannot possibly believe that this can be done in a remotely responsible manner in a democracy in so short a period of time. And that's exclusive of those important constitutional considerations that Michael identified.
Well, Tsipras has not walked, at least not as of the time of us doing this interview. Apparently, he's raised 4 objections to what's been presented to him, one of which, of course, is jettison the $50 billion of assets, no IMF involvement. Now, why is that so important that he wants no IMF involvement?
I mean, that's an interesting question. From my perspective, the creditors have all been equally, with possible exception of some of the Eurozone governments, equally ruthless and insistent and unreasonable in their dealings with the Greek government. I think there may be a perception, Michael may be able to speak to this better than I could, within Greece, that the IMF is perhaps more an instrument of American imperialism than the other institutions. For me, from my perspective, they're all equally as noxious.
Michalis, why is he making such an issue of no IMF involvement?
I think one possible answer to this is that Tsipras' government would like to settle the crisis, which is not only a Greek crisis, it's a crisis in the Eurozone, and to try to confine it within the European context and not have IMF's involvement in it. As a result of that, just 5 minutes ago, IMF, or there is some information, some reports that the IMF is calling for Tsipras' resignation.
A lot of people are saying that's what this whole proposal is about, is the resignation of the Syriza government. The hashtag that's trending right now, I think it just went up a few hours ago, which is hashtag this is a coup. That seems, many people think that is what this is all about, is to bring down Syriza.
Yeah, I think this is more than clear for many months now, in fact. It seems to me that the European leadership does not want any government on our continent that has some differences, or it has a different orientation from what the leaders of the European Union say, namely the Germans and the Dutch and whoever else agrees with them. So, and they want to undermine the government. The original strategy was um, left-wing break. In other words, give or allow Syriza to enter the governmental power, and we're going to put such obstacles to them that at the end of the day they won't be able to survive, and they will withdraw. They've been trying within in the country. They've been doing that by using the deep state. They've been trying to do that through using the media, and they've been doing this by trying to split Syriza itself. And so there were some frictions or difference of opinion, I would say, within Syriza around the memorandum. There was some difference of opinion around the memorandum, the referendum. I'm sorry, within Syriza, and but the result of the memorandum put an end to this difference of opinion, and the question after this huge victory, given that the war waged by the media and and having the banks closed, that the Greek people overwhelmingly vote against the austerity, the continuation of austerity, why the government proposed a very similar proposal to our creditors.
So what's the answer to that? Why?
The answer is that the government probably is very skeptical because it seems that the Greek society and the government is not ready to go all the way and have a rupture with the Eurozone.
Well, what do you think of the theory? A lot of people are talking about that Tsipras and Varoufakis actually were hoping and expecting the yes vote to win, and they didn't. They were caught when the no vote won.
No, I don't think this is true. Probably a few people in and around Syriza had that hope, but you can't say, it's unfair to say that for either Varoufakis or for Tsipras, who they were very strong with a no vote. But no one was expecting the extent of that victory. The most optimistic prediction was at the time having a 55-45. Now you have almost a 62%. Again, I have to underline, this is a result having the banks closed and having huge lineups to get 50 or 60 euros a day, standing in front of the ATMs, and having 4 or 5 major channels terrorizing and engaging into terrorizing.
But do you think that political moment, the political capital, you could say, that came from that vote, that moment, was kind of wasted with a question that kind of left everything up in the air? Because, I mean, the question was, you know, do you reject that specific proposal? But there was no then what?
Well, let's think of the events after the referendum. The first thing that Tsipras did is they call a meeting of the leaders of all parties and try from a hegemonic point of view, having won the referendum, to sign a statement saying that it's going to be a just agreement, an agreement that will deal with the debt and guarantees some money for investment and development for the country. And then he went to the European Parliament. He put forward a proposal. He went to the European Parliament. Now there, if one likes to analyze the semantics and the politics of that meeting, which lasted 5 or 6 hours, it's quite interesting, because Tsipras had a very warm welcome from a good part of the European Socialist Party, the majority of the Greens, and of course the party of the European left. And of course he got a very hostile welcome, if I can use that expression, by everybody else. And he was very good in the exchange of between him and the leaders of, or the spokesmen of all the wings of the European Parliament. Now, if I was Schäuble or Merkel, who would like to have one single voice in the European political scene, a voice that accepts and dances to the rhythm of the markets, and I don't want any sidetracks by anybody. I would worry about the appeal that Tsipras himself has on the European states. We are about 3 months ago or so away from the Spanish election, and the Irish election is not all that far away. So that probably contributed to make the line of Schäuble and the rest of the people there.
That's the German foreign finance minister.
Finance minister, the Baltic countries, and the Dutch to be more hostile against the Greek proposal, which was already a further concession, which maybe was moving away from capitalizing on this victory, but using that, sort of abandoning the momentum that this victory was given to the Greek people.
Dimitri, a lot of people are talking about this on Twitter and emails flying back and forth. You know, was this proposal that came from the Greek government essentially a capitulation after the results of the referendum? And is what's going on now likely to be even a further capitulation? But did Tsipras and the Syriza government have any choice?
They have a choice. It's not a particularly palatable choice. The choice being a withdrawal from the Eurozone, and it's not palatable for two reasons. First being that requires an immense amount of preparation, and even in the best of circumstances, that is a process that required many months to be executed competently in a way that doesn't cause significant damage to the economy. And all the reports that I've seen and all the indications that I've seen is that Syriza, the leadership, not the left platform, but the leadership is completely invested in remaining within the Eurozone, so much so that no meaningful practical preparations have been made for the possibility of a Grexit. So that increases the potential harm to the economy and to the people of Greece should that avenue be pursued. The other is the political obstacle to a Grexit, and Michael touched upon this. Michael mentioned that the Greek people don't seem to be ready for this. From my perspective, that's not so clear, and I say that for several reasons. First of all, the polls which are frequently cited as evidence that the Greek people don't want to leave the Eurozone, many of them, if not almost all of them, have been conducted by media organizations or commissioned by media organizations in Greece that are controlled by the oligarchy. And the polling in Greece has performed very poorly. And I think the referendum is an excellent example of this. Michael indicated that the most optimistic prediction from a poll vis-a-vis the no vote was a 10-point margin of victory. The margin of victory was 24 points at the end of the day. That's a huge discrepancy given the number of polls that were performed. As I say, that was the one that predicted the largest margin of victory. Others showed that there was going to be a vote, the difference in the vote was going to be 2 or 3 percentage points. Some were even predicting a yes victory. And yet you had this massive discrepancy between the no vote and the yes vote. How could they all have gotten it that wrong? You have, in the context of a Grexit, polls from external organizations or independent organizations like Gallup in 2014 in December, which showed a slight majority wanting to leave the Eurozone or preferring the drachma. There was another in March of this year by an organization, an independent polling organization called Bridging Europe, which showed 53% wanted to leave the Eurozone. So there's an issue about whether these polls that show a desire to remain within the Eurozone to be accurate and reliable. But there's also the question of what happened in the referendum. One after the other, the very people, including those who are now presenting themselves as champions of Greece, the Prime Minister of Italy, the President of France, they came forward the day after the referendum was announced and stated clearly that a vote against the ultimatum of the Troika was a vote for an exit from the Eurozone. And of course, Prime Minister Tsipras disagreed, but I think many Greek voters understood that the leaders of the Troika held all the cards and that their threat should be taken seriously. They haven't hesitated to punish the Greek population all these 5 years. So I think the threat was probably taken quite seriously by a number of people who voted Orchi. And they nonetheless voted Orchi. And so one could interpret, because of the very clear message and threat that was directed at the Greek electorate in the run-up to the referendum, no one could interpret that vote as being a vote supportive of a Grexit. And the last thing I'll say is that the right question hasn't been asked of the Greek electorate in these polls. They shouldn't simply be asked whether they want to remain in the Eurozone. Of course, if the Eurozone is a virtuous Eurozone, which is progressive and has a strong social welfare component and where inequalities are not grotesque as they are becoming, then, of course, people may very much desire to be in the Eurozone. The question rather is whether they prefer to remain in the Eurozone at any cost. And that question, as far as I know, has not been put to them. And if it were, it would be very interesting to see what their answer would be.
Michalis, what do you think?
Yeah, one short comment. When I mentioned that the Greek population is not ready, I didn't mean just the sentiment of the Greek population, although I didn't know the polls taken that they give the a slight majority, at least, of the Greek population that would like to leave the Eurozone. I can say that after the experience of the last 10 days, the Greek population is ready, or it was willing to leave the Eurozone, because under the circumstances there is not going to be any future for the society. I refer, however, that the Greeks are not ready in terms of the technical aspect of this, if there is a technical aspect. I don't know if there is a plan from the part of the authorities, and even if there is a plan from the government, I don't think that we do have the civil servants, or we have the capacity of implementing such a plan. Which is going to be, as we all know, very, very difficult to implement. But at that point, having the latest proposal from Schäuble and the others, that the government is asked actually to roll back every legislation that they put forward in the last 6 months.
Yeah, this I understand. It even means, for example, some of the cleaners and teachers that were rehired are going to have to be laid off again.
Yes, and even close again the National Broadcasting Corporation, or
say that again. They want them to close the public broadcaster.
To shut it down.
Which would give the private media the complete monopoly.
Another kind of monopoly. And what else? And even to roll back all the tax breaks that were given to individuals or to small businesses, and even roll back some humanitarian measures that they took. This is a coup, in fact, and because they want to humiliate the government and bring the government down. That's the whole thing.
Michalis, when we were doing interviews and discussing all this, even before Syriza actually won, when the polls were showing Syriza was likely to win, we were saying on the Real News things like be careful what you wish for. And I don't understand. Well, one, I never personally quite agreed with them running without saying, yes, we want to stay in the Eurozone, but we will prepare a plan B. And I don't understand it, even if they didn't want to say that in the election, why they didn't prepare a plan B. This seems rather predictable that the Germans were not going to go along with this. And if there was any weakness on Syriza's part, they would pummel them, which is what they're doing.
Yeah, well, there is a base to criticize Syriza. And the base is not that they made one capital mistake. The major mistake is that they thought that Europe and European Union still operate on rational principles. They thought that, okay, we will go there. So what happened? They thought that they would go there, will state their argument, will be well documented, and they will show that the previous austerity program doesn't work. And they thought that they can convince the other parties, but that didn't work like that. They undermined the fact that the European Union's leadership and all the creditors, they do not want Syriza and Tsipras on the political map of Europe and the dynamic that this presence brings. Also, what was underestimated by Syriza's part is that they thought that European appreciate democratic reactions or democratic criticism to the economics and social policies.
Well, that seems a little naive.
You said it. It was very naive, because the Syriza coming into power was, of course, partially the result of the crisis and the result of the policies followed to deal with the crisis. But it was a democratic response. In almost every other country in Europe, with the exception, of course, of Spain and Ireland, we had political responses that they are changing the maps of individual countries, but these political responses were, at best, right-wing populists, Eurosceptics, radical rights, and even neo-Nazi responses. It seems that the European leadership can tolerate these political developments, but does not tolerate a democratic response to the crisis. Mind you, this democratic response comes from a radical left-wing political party. And it was actually this, they were really naive that way, that the European leadership would understand that. That's why it seems that there is not such a plan for the rupture with the European with the Eurozone. A further point is that there is in the European agreements, there is no provision for leaving the Eurozone. Even if a country wants to leave the Eurozone, it's not possible. But again, another naivety of the government is that the agreements matter. No, sorry, but the agreements in the European Union do not matter. Procedures do not matter. Power, naked political and economic power seems that matters.
Well, it seems to me anyone looks at the 20th century should know that. Dimitri,
Yeah.
just a final word to you. I know you were elated when Syriza won, and then you were increasingly concerned. What do you think comes next?
Well, I fear for the worst. I don't really get a sense from the messages that are coming out of the bloc that is led by Germany that there is going to be a proposal put on the table that can be accepted by the government, that will not precipitate a collapse in the government if it were to be accepted. And by the same token, as I indicated, there's real doubt as to whether the government is remotely prepared for the eventuality of the collapse of the financial system and the issuance, the seizing of the banks and the issuance of a parallel currency. I think most likely what we're going to see is a disorderly Grexit at this point. And I'm hopeful that other nations, including the United States, but by no means limited to the United States, will come forward with humanitarian and technical assistance to ease the pain of the Greek population.
Well, it seems to me what Michalis is saying seems logical, which is the objective here is the fall of Syriza. And if they can get if Syriza does fall, and then you put in some technocrats backed by the military, but essentially a technocratic government that does exactly what the finance ministers of Europe and the Troika want, then they do the austerity on steroids, and Syriza, I assume, splits in various ways.
That may happen, but eventually, I actually don't think that's. I don't think that that all of that can occur quickly enough to prevent a collapse of the financial system. First of all, but even if it can, this program will make it even. It will accelerate the default on Greek debt. It is such a draconian, contractionary set of policies that that eventually Greece will default on all of its debt, not merely on the IMF debt, and that will precipitate an exit from the Eurozone. So it may delay the exit, but the exit will occur, and ultimately the will of the Greek people will be respected, although people may suffer enormously in the interim.
Michalis, you wanted to say one final thing?
There is still, and it's the turn of our leadership. The negotiations are still going on all night tonight. There is still a last chance, and the last chance to prevent all this is to say no and leave the negotiation table. And I'm pretty sure the support of the Greek people this time is going to be far more than 60%.
I agree with that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be following this all tomorrow as well. And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.